This special trip takes us to a little town in Nebraska called Arthur. Arthur, Nebraska, the county seat for Arthur County. The county named for Chester A. Arthur, who was president when the county was organized. Today the town of Arthur has a population of about 180. There are more cows than people. Arthur County is located in the heart of the sandhills country of Nebraska. This land was homesteaded by many people. Buffalo Bill Cody had a homestead shack in Arthur County, which the Arthur Historical Society moved into town. Congressman Moses P. Kincaid set up the Kincaid Act of 1904, which opened up 37 counties of northwest Nebraska to be settled. The difference between a homestead and a Kincaid was that each person would be given 640 acres instead of 160. 160 acres not being enough land to sustain a family, especially in the sandhills. Some found 640 acres weren't enough. It takes 15 to 20 acres for each head of cattle. Each person, having lived and made improvements on the land for 5 years, received a patent. Between November 1910 and July 1917, a total of 18,919 patents were issued. The people that settled this land were of many different nationalities, one of the highest being the Czechs. They were, in fact, the second most populous immigrant group. Some 70,000 came to Nebraska between 1865 and 1900. Most of the Czechs came from a land called Bohemia. These people were well educated, especially in the arts. One thing you could always be sure of, there was plenty of music in the Bohemian communities. Homesteading was not easy in this sandy country. Many found that the plow was not welcome by this loose soil. The wind would blow it away. In wet years, crops grew much better, but without good irrigation, they found that cattle was the easiest thing to raise. Lush green hills of grama grass provide pasture and grazing. 18,000 square miles of sandhills, the hills rising 25 to 100 feet higher than the valleys below. The hills made up of dune and Valentine's sand, which is windblown sand made from the disintegration of sandstone. There are 500 million acres of groundwater pumped by the hundreds of windmills scattered across the hills, providing the much-needed water for the cattle. You'll find the green hillsides dotted with cattle and soapweeds, better known as yucca. There are quite a number of different wildflowers also. The land is open and airy, and you can climb to the top of a hill and look for miles onto other hills and valleys uninterrupted. The people of this land are God-loving people. There are 3 different churches in the tiny community of Arthur. One of these churches is a national landmark. This church is made of baled hay. The baled hay is laid like bricks, with the walls being 2.5 feet thick, then stucco applied over that. This church was in use until 1976. Not many of the original homesteaders are still around to talk about the old days, but we found one. Mr. Joe Monhart, who as a child came to this country from Bohemia, and his wife Winnie, whose folks homesteaded here even before Joe came to this county. We found Joe and Winnie living in town in a baled hay house. We're talking today with what I would call a real pioneer, Mr. Joe Monhart. And Joe, first of all, I'd like to ask you, when and where were you born? That's okay, I'll just hold it.
I was born in old country, Bohemia, Austria-Hungary at the time, in 1892, the year Columbus discovered America. And I lived there till the folks left the country for America. I was, my name is Monhart, and my dad was a miner engineer or something like that. Anyway, he worked in the mines, and there was blasting down in the mine there, some kind of a canal or channel or something. Anyway, and it's what they call a drip. Before he sent his men in to put up the timbers to hold up the rest of it, he stepped in that tunnel, and as he stepped in a few steps to find out whether it was safe enough for his men to go in to put up the timbers, he stepped in, and as he stepped in a few steps, a big slab of rock came down on him and smashed him and killed him. And my mother remarried when I was about 2 years old. My dad got killed when I was about 2 years old. Then my mother remarried. My stepdad's name was Spurney. And I lived in the family, and I went under the name of Joe Monhart through school there in the old country. And then they had a strike in that mine, and the folks, all the miners struck, and it lasted about 3 or 4 months. I forget now how long it was. It was a long time. Anyway, they finally got it settled, and the miners went back to work. And I remember my stepdad and my mother talking about it. The miners were worse off after the strike and settlement than they were before they struck. And my stepdad had a brother in Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. And he was writing to my stepdad, wanted him to come out. And it took folks quite a while before they finally decided to move to United States. And they moved, they started, and they left Bohemia. And when they got to Bremen, Germany to get on a ship, Brandenburg was the name of the ship, and the sailing authorities told my stepdad he'd better put me down as his own son. It would save a lot of red tape. So he put me down under the name of Joe Spurney instead of Joe Monhart. And of course it didn't make any much difference to me. I was just a kid, but I got on that ship, and in the meantime, I'll tell you one thing. After my dad got killed and my mother married, folks bought me an old fiddle for Christmas. It was an old fiddle, and I started to school, music school, right after the New Year's. And I went to that school for 7 or 8 years. And it wasn't once or twice a month or once or twice a week. It was an everyday occurrence. And I went to that school for about 8 years. We had 10 books on the fiddle, and I went through the whole works. And when we got on the ship from Bremen, Germany, I fiddled for some of those highfalutin boys up there. And let me tell you something, I used to get a hatful of pfennigs or crowns, and well, they didn't mean much to me, but if they throwed in a banana or orange, something like that, I'll tell you that took my eye. And folks went across the ocean and wound up in Chicago, and my stepdad went to work very next day after we got there. His brother had a job for him awaiting. And us kids went to school. There was a half-brother, Frank. He was about 5 years younger than I was. And my brother, stepbrother, half-brother, Henry, and a sister, Mary, half-sister. And Frank and I, we went to school. Henry wasn't quite old enough. And we stayed there. I don't know how long we stayed in Chicago, but that Chicago city, as I remembered, I was just a kid, but I'll tell you, I was horrified at the shape that town was in, dirty And the folks, my mother's relation lived in Kansas, Belleville, Kansas, the county seat in Republic County. Their post office number was Cuba. And the folks decided that it would be better for us kids to grow up on a farm than it would be in that dirty city. So they moved to Cuba, Kansas, and we lived on a farm there. And I went under the name of Joe Spurney. I went through school there, and folks just knew me just as Joe Spurney.
What year did you move to Kansas then?
I couldn't tell you. It must have been 1907 or 8. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Don't remember. And I lived there. Went through school there, and I fiddled for dances there in Kansas. And my birthday comes on 26th day of July. And my stepdad one day told me, well, Joe, you better take your dad's name. Well, it kind of stumped me because I forgot I was a Monhart. Everybody knew me as a Joe Spurney, and that's how I knew myself as a Joe Spurney. But I had to take out my citizenship papers and my own name, Joseph Monhart, and I did. And one Saturday evening, I played for a lot of dances there, and I played for a dance that night. And about midnight, there was a group of young men came over to my corner when they usually had their break, and I heard them talking about going to Broken Bow to register for a kincaid. Well, I didn't know what a kincaid was and cared less, but I did want a little vacation, and I knew all those boys, and I thought it'd be fun to take a little trip. So I says, can I go with you guys? Well, sure. So I went with them, and there was 10 or 12 of us went to Broken Bow to register for a kincaid.
Can you tell us what is a kincaid?
Kincaid is a homestead. Homestead used to be in a size of 160 acres, but during this certain land was in the sandhills of Nebraska, and Senator Kincaid didn't think that 160 acres was sufficient to support a family, so he had him increase the homestead entry to 640 acres instead of 160, and that was a kincaid. Mm-hmm. And so we went to Broken Bow. Well, I went to Broken Bow with the boys, and when we got to Broken Bow, the land office or whatever it was, a long old table, a lot of papers to fill out. Well, I went through the same rigmarole that the boys did when I filled out the papers and signed my name, this and that. And when we got through, the clerk, if that's what he was, told us, if you be lucky enough to draw a low enough number to draw a homestead, you'll be notified by the federal government by registered mail. And, well, I kind of forgot all about it. And I fiddled for dances there. But I happened to be in our little town of Wayne, Kansas, where we got our mail. And I knew the postmaster. His name was Herb Lilly. Him and I played in the same band in that little town of Wayne. Our bandstand is still there in the middle of the street. And I just happened to kind of think about that registered mail, and I says, Herb, is there any registered mail for Joe Monhart? He looked, he says, yes. I said, that's me. Well, he looked at me, he didn't call me a liar, but he wouldn't give me that registered mail. I had to go back home and take my citizenship papers and bring him down to him and show him that I was a Joe Monhart.
Yeah, he knew you as Joe Spurney, right?
Yeah, everybody knew me, just Joe Spurney, see? Mm-hmm. I went under that name. And when he seen my citizenship papers, then he gave me that registered mail, and I draw the low enough number to draw on homestead or kincaid. And when the people found out that I drawed one, I was the only one out of that dozen or 10 or 12 or whatever, I forget now how many of us there was. I was the only one got a low enough number. When the people there found out that I had drawn a homestead, they wanted to buy a relinquishment. Well, I didn't know what a relinquishment meant, but I knew it had something to do with my homestead. I said, nothing doing, I'm going to keep it. And then I played for a dance one Saturday night after that, and there was an old Indian, George Marley they called him, and he came over to my corner. He was a drunkard, but he came over to my corner and he said, Joe, I heard you was going up in the sandhills in Nebraska. I wouldn't go up in that godforsaken country, nothing but rattlesnake and soapweeds. Well, I didn't know what a really soapweed was. I knew what a rattlesnake was. But I didn't say a word. And I went up there when I went up there to pick out my homestead, I took a train from Kearney from North Platte from Kearney to North Platte, that was it. And I got there on a Saturday, and I had to lay over Sunday because there was no train on that branch line to Bridgeport, then to Alliance, then to Hyannis. And there was an old Japanese restaurant from the depot in North Platte, and I waited there over Sunday, and that Sunday day I sat there all day, and there was an elderly man come to where I sat, and he got to talking to me, and he wanted to know what I was doing, where I was going, and I told him. Well, he says, when you get through up there, if you stop at Belmar, and if you need a job, you can stop in, I'll give you a job. His name was Herman Fairchild. He was a big operator there at Belmar, Nebraska, cattleman. And so I went up to the ranch with him then. I went up to the Bridgeport, then to Alliance, then down to Hyannis, and I picked out my homestead. And then I went back, and when I got to Belmar, I needed a job. I was just about broke. And I got off there at Belmar, and he gave me a job. I went to work. Then about 4 or 5 days, I had to go to North Platte to certify some more papers in regards to my homestead. Then I got back, and I went back to work. And we was working cattle there in the corral there. He had a big barn and a lot of corrals there, and his house was a 2 or 3 story house, and it was a kind of a warm day, and I was kind of soft anyway, and that sun beat in that corral, and I want a drink of water awful bad. And he had an old Eclipse windmill in that corral in a great big tank, and every time that old windmill went around, that water came out of that spout there, and I looked at it, just pure. Old Herman came over there, and he hollered at us boys. He said, if you boys want a drink of water, don't drink that water out of that windmill there. Come down to the house to get a drink of water. But he didn't tell us why we shouldn't drink that water. Well, he left, and I got pretty dry, and I've seen that windmill go around, and I went over there and I seen that water come out of that spout just as pure and clear as any water I've seen. And I stuck my nose under that spout. I tasted that water and tasted just as sweet as it could be. And I took a good big drink of it. And I said, what in the world is the use of walking down to the house? It must have been 200 or 300 yards. I took a good big drink of it, and I forgot about it. About 3 days after that, we was working some more cattle down on the river bottom, and all at once I got awfulest pain in my stomach, in my innards. And Herman's a horseback off to one side. I rode over there, and I told him, I said, Mr. Fairchild, I'm awful sick. He looked at me, and he says, you drank some of that damn water out of that well in the corrals, didn't you? Well, I forgot all about it. I didn't say I did, or I didn't say I didn't. But he said, stick around here a few more minutes and we'll be through, and then you can go on up to the house. So I did, Stuck around there for a few minutes, and I started for the house. It must have been 2 or 3 miles. When I got to the house and got in front of the house, I just fell off of the horse. Mrs. Fairchild was there on the porch. She helped me up, and my room was upstairs in that house, and I crawled upstairs. As she went there in the other room, she called the doctor right away. They seemed to know right away what was wrong with me. But I had the awfulest misery, just like if you took a knife and put it in my guts and well.
They weren't telling you what was wrong, though.
No, they didn't tell me. And I crawled upstairs and I crawled in bed. And about a couple hours, there was a couple of men come upstairs, and each one had a bag. Great big medicine bag. Or anyway, that's what the doctor had his medicine in. They come into my room, and they set the bags down. And when the Dr. Likens was his name, when he got through poking me here and there and all over, he went to one of his bags and opened it up. And he's going to get his medicine, but when he opened it up, he slammed it shut. And he swore like a trooper. He picked up the next bag and opened it up. The same thing. That medicine, when he come across that tableland from Ogallala to Belmar, no road, just a rough road, in the back of his car, it just mixed up his medicine, broke his bottles and boxes, and he didn't have any medicine. And he told me, he said, I don't have any medicine for you here right now, but I'll mail it to you. And he did. And the other man was Grandpa Stafford. That was my wife's father. Dr. Likens come across that tableland, and the Grandpa Stafford homestead was right on the edge of that tableland. And the trail, or the road as they call it, passed right past that place. And Dr. Likens didn't really know where Herman Fairchild Ranch was, so he stopped there, and Grandpa Stafford came with him. And then they went back, and I took awful sick, and they got the medicine, and I laid there in bed for 3 or 4 months. Before I took sick, I weighed around 175 pounds, and when I got able to get on a scale, I weighed 118 pounds, so I lost quite a lot of fat.
Mm-hmm.
But I got over it, and I got able to get home. Then I fixed up my old covered wagon and fixed it up, filled it up with horse feed, and Mother fixed it up for feed for me, bread and stuff. And when I started out, one morning, it wasn't very early, I started out on my trip across state of Nebraska. My mother says, Joe, if you can't go to your own church, go to any church on Sunday mornings. And I did. And I started on that trip, and the first day trip I made, I don't know how far I went. I couldn't have made over 20, 30 miles, I guess. And I stopped. I watered my team there about a half a mile before I stopped. Watered my team. That's all I needed. I had everything else, but I had to water my team, and I drove on up. And that night, one of these early spring blizzards hit. The wind blew, and my team was used to warm barn, and they got kind of noisy, and they jerked that old wagon around. I thought, I stopped the wrong place to. I faced north, and the wind come from the north. If I just a few hundred yards before I stopped, there was a hedgerow windbreak. If I'd have stopped there, maybe I wouldn't have had that trouble. But I did there, and that old team just jerked that wagon around, and I thought they was going to upset it. But they finally broke loose, and I figured they went home. Well, I just made myself believe, now if those nags went home, I'm going to go home too, and by golly, I'm going to stay there. But instead of that, you know, I walked down there where that windbreak or that hedgerow was turned west, east and west. There they were. The doggone team was there, and I had to hitch them up and come on. And I did. And by golly, you know, that was quite a... I hitched them up and I come on. And in a way, that was the nicest trip I ever took. I could tie my lines around the front dashboard and look around, take in the sights and everything, you know, and the team just went on, just jogging on. And I don't know how many days I've traveled, but it was southeast of Kearney, around Kennesaw or whatever those little towns were. I never tried to make any towns. I just stopped wherever night caught me. I started usually in the morning by sunrise, a little after, and I quit sundown a little after.
How many miles do you think you made a day?
Oh, I would imagine around 50 miles a day, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I don't know.
And you were all alone?
I was all by myself. There was another kid gonna come with me. A fellow by the name of Ray Johnson was his name. He was a little bit younger than I was, but he was gonna come with me. And I figured on him coming with me. But just a few days before I had to start, you see, I had to be on my homestead certain day of the month of April.
Mm-hmm.
And he took sick, and he couldn't come, and I had to go alone. And this here, on Easter Sunday, I was southeast of Kearney someplace there, and traveling. Easter Sunday used to be a big day at our house always. I looked up there, and there was a white building there, not a very big building, but there was a lot of buggies there, and some Model T Fords or whatever they were. And when I got even there, even with it, I stopped and I heard some of the best singing you ever heard. And I stopped and listened, and I tell you, there was tears come out of my eyes, because Easter Sunday was well, it brought memories, brought back my home, and there I was all by myself. And finally it dawned on me, it says, Joe, you better be moving. Those folks might think you're up to something. So I started on, and I didn't travel over 2 or 3 miles. I come to another building, and same thing. Buggies all around it, celebrating Easter Sunday. Man, was I ever homesick. Well, I started on, and that evening, about sundown, a little before, I looked up ahead, and there was a great big old white house. Kind of reminded me of old Herman Fairchild's house. But all I could see was the top of it white, and I could see the windmill and big old white barn. And so I pulled off to one side, and that's all I had to do, just take my horse to where they could get water. I had my feed with me. So I unhitched that team, and I led him up there to the water. It was a short quarter, I guess. And when I stood there at the tank, there was an old man come out of that house. He came over to me and he spoke to me. He wanted to know where I was going and what I was doing. I told him what I was doing and what my business was. And he wanted to know where my wagon was, and I told him. Well, he told me to go and hitch on to the wagon and bring the wagon to the yard. Then you can put your team in the barn. So I took the team back there and hitched onto the wagon and pulled it in the yard. And just as I pulled it in and started to unhitch my team, there was a bunch of kids come out of that house. Easter Sunday must have been a big Sunday at his house, because there was kids, his kids, and their kids' kids. He had a house full. After I got unhitched my team, and just as I was just about through, one of the kids come out of that covered wagon. They went through my wagon like a bunch of pack rats. One of the kids hollered, "Mister, can you play this?" I looked back and I seen he had my fiddle case.
Is that your fiddle down there? Is that the same one?
No. And I nodded my head, and that's all he wanted to know. They went on to the house. And man, they had a great big supper. It's a big Sunday, Easter Sunday at this house. And they fed me. And after they had their supper and they had their dishes done, they went into the other room, and they had an old organ there. And I played on the fiddle, and there was a lady on the organ, and the rest of them sang. And we fiddled and sang till midnight. About midnight. When we finally got through singing, those kids, they're all over the floor. You couldn't hardly walk around there. Kids sleep all over the floor. But I got out of there, and the old man offered me a bed in the house, but I told him I had a bed in the wagon. And so I went and slept in the wagon, and the rest of them went home, I guess. And then the next morning, they fed me again. And when I was hitching up, I asked the old man how much I owed him. He told me, he said, "Boy, you better keep it. You might need it." He was a German. I could tell the way he spoke. He was foreign German. Then from then I came to the Platte River, the old wooden bridge, and then that turns out when you see a rig coming up towards you and you're close to one of those turns out, it's good for you if you take a turn out and wait till that guy comes past. And I had to do that twice before I got across. Then I got across, and Lincoln Highway, as they call it now, ended there. Well, it started on, afterwards, started on west of Kearney, but it was just a country road. Just a section line. You go about a mile, then you go north, then you go west, then you go south, just a mile at a time. It was twice as far from Kearney to North Platte as it is today. And now I got to North Platte, and just before I got to North Platte, I met a couple of boys. Millers was their name. One of those boys homesteaded up there in Arthur County too, and they was going up there. And we got to talking together. We traveled together. Then we got through North Platte and past we got on the north side of the river and past that creek up there. I forget now what the name of it was. It's a big creek. And we traveled on together till we got to Arthur County. Then I went up to my homestead. And how much longer you want me to?
Yeah, you can quit right now.
Okay, I'm quitting.
And
I got on my homestead there. We found their homestead first. And I unhooked my team. I had my team there. And I straddled one of my horses. And I figured out by the map about just about where my homestead was, and I found it. So the next day I hitched onto my wagon, went over there and got my own homestead. In April, I think it was April 14th or 15th when I landed on my homestead.
in what year?
1914.
1914.
Yeah. Okay. During the summer days on my homestead, I worked for the ranchers during the weekdays in the haying time. One summer I worked for old Ed Patrick, a big operator down on the river bottom, and Cy Peterson. He lived on the Otter Creek. And I worked for them through the hayfield. And Ed and Cy, they leased a lot of land up there on the tableland. That was before it was broke up for wheat. There's nothing but grass there. There was no wheat there. Well, Grandpa Stafford had a homestead right on the edge, and he had a little field of some kind of a crop. But most of that land was in grassland, and the good grass, I guess. Anyway, Cy and Ed thought it was. And so they leased a lot of that land from the federal government, I guess. And I was one of the hay crew. And they leased it, and then we hauled the machinery. We crossed the North Platte River down there. We started somewhere north. Charlie Samuelson lived on the south side, and we started on the north side of the river somewhere there. And we pulled our sweeps and the mowing machines and rakes and teams, horses, and crossed that river. We got across all right. Everything was just fine. We crossed the river with all them implements. And we got up there and we was working in the hayfield, and we boarded at the Stafford Homestead. Oh, now old Grandma Stafford, she made us some of the best biscuits you ever tasted. She sure was a good cook. I remember the first morning we got up there. We lived in a tent, I suppose did, there outside. And the first morning we went there for breakfast, and there was a big long table in the kitchen, and it was just piled up. Man, you couldn't, well, it just dawned on me. I said, where in the world, what's going to become of all that grub? Well, when those boys got through, that table was just as clean as well, you couldn't hardly believe it, that those kids could eat so much. Well, of course, I didn't eat very much. The rest of them did. And we worked there, and you know, Winnie, that was my wife's name, had a sister, Bessie. She had a brother, Wilbur. And she had a brother, Earl. They were all home. And I'll tell you right now, well, that Winnie, she wasn't very big, and I thought I could handle her, you know. And so I worked and rocked there. We got there and we worked there, and by golly, we went together. And I remember afterward, I was working for Ed yet. One Sunday afternoon, well, that Sunday morning, they had me play at the Presbyterian Church down there at Lemoyne, Nebraska. And we was kind of late. I was kind of late getting home. But Mother Patrick had a dinner for me when I got home. I beat the rest of them up there, and she had a dinner for me. I ate my dinner. And then I hooked onto my buggy, and I started across the river to see my wife. And by golly, I got down in the river. I got out there about 300 yards into that river, and my team hit the water all at once. And by jinks, well, I heard that when the horse hits quicksand, you know, he'll lay right down. So I knew I was all dressed up and had nowhere to go. And there was my team laying down in water. It wasn't very deep. And I wondered what in the world I was going to do. I was all dressed up. So the only thing I could do, I stepped out of my tar buggy, unhitched the tugs, and give each one of the horses a kick, and they struggled and they got up. So I straddled one of them, but my buggy was there, stranded in the river, but I straddled one of those horses, and I went back to the ranch. And I drove up there, and just as I passed the house, I guess that Patrick seen me a-coming, and he stepped outdoors, and just about that time they had a preacher there from the same church where I played. He stepped out there too, and Ed Patrick wanted to know what was wrong, and I told him, I said, my horses hit the quicksand and they went down, and I had to leave my buggy. Well, the preacher says, let's go help get the boys' buggy out. And about that time, Herman and Fred Soule, that was the two boys, German boys down there on the river bottom, their folks, big ranchers there. And they had a car, whatever make it was, I don't remember. But anyway, the preacher talked them into notion to take Ed, and those two Soule boys and the preacher, they went down to get my buggy out. But I could cut across, but they had to follow the road. And when I got down there, the bank was kind of high where I stopped, and they had their pants rolled up, you know, and each one of them on a wheel, and they were just worked on that buggy, you know. And I don't know what, something tickled me, and I got to laughing, and I just couldn't stop laughing. Man, it just tickled. It's funny. And they finally got the buggy out, and they pulled it clear out. And when they got up there on the bank where I was, those two Soule boys was going to throw me in the river. They was mad because I laughed at them. And the preacher saved my life again there that time. He said, boys, don't do that. He's all dressed up. Don't do that. So they pulled out the buggy there, and I had to hitch my team back on the buggy, and I had to go clear on by Belmar over the wooden bridge there, and went up there. It's about 12 miles farther, or 14. But I got there, and I met my wife there, and I thought she could make those biscuits like her mother, but she can't, you know. No. And we fooled around together till following spring then. And then we finally traveled down to North Platte, and we got married. Then we traveled back up onto my kingdom up in the hills. And you know, she didn't like my castle like I showed you on that picture, you know. She had me build a house. What do you know about that? So I built a house, 14 by 24. Broke me out of this. And then we lived there, and we lived there. And I fiddled for dances. I'll tell you, that old fiddle of mine paid for a good many sacks of flowers and bought a good many kids' shoes. But we lived there till we got to 1930 in Depression, when the Depression hit. Our kids was big enough to go to high school. Some of them already did go to high school, and there was one or two more that go that year. And we didn't have any money to pay for the board or buy gas for the automobile. Election was coming up, and I told wife, I says, I'm going to run for an election. I'm going to run for an office, and if I get elected, we'll move to town and we can send the kids to school then. And in the meantime, there was an elderly couple in Arthur that run a sort of a eating joint and sleeping joint, and they wanted to quit, and they wanted somebody to take it over, so she moved in and took it over with the kids. And by golly, I done some electioneering that fall, and I didn't think I would, but I did get elected, don't you know. And I stayed there for 36 years in that office, Arthur County. Now I'm back up here in the old baled hay house. The first house we bought when I moved to town in 1935, in the year 1st of January 1935. Wife was still down there at the eating joint, but we had to have a house for us to, so we bought this house, and we lived in it now for, well, close to 45 years, I guess, and we expect to spend the rest of our days in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's ask Winnie a couple of questions here and find out a little bit about her history. And were you born here in Nebraska?
I was born in David City, Nebraska, in Butler County.
How far from here is that?
Oh, 300 miles, I think.
So I'd expect.
Yeah. And my folks, my father took a homestead around Scotts Bluff, 160 acres. And we started with 3 covered wagons, 2 covered wagons, and a spring wagon with tents and paraphernalia to go up there to the homestead. And we stopped in Perkins County to visit Bill Stevens' family. He was a distant cousin of my father's. And he told us we'd starve to death up there. So we stayed, and then we settled in Ogallala that winter. And then we moved on to a place in, my father bought a place on the river. But he found out about a homestead, a Kincaid, up part on the tableland, part in the hills. And we moved up there, and that's where I met Joe.
He said you didn't like his castle that he had there. How long did you have to live in that castle before he built you your house?
I stayed there about 3 nights.
She graduated from Arthur County from Ogallala High School in 1916, and she hitched me in June in 1916. See, I was caught ever since June, the month of June in 1916.
How many children did you have?
We had 5. There was
Betty,
and Billy and Bonnie were twins. And Lucille and Frances.
And Bonnie Bell, she passed away. She died.
Well, that was 19.
58, wasn't it?
I don't remember. She was 54 years old.
Mm-hmm. I imagine a day at that time would have been pretty long for you, as well as the men in the house, and I'm sure the women probably had to take a back seat in that role, but from what I hear, you're the boss around here, is that right?
You bet I am.
Okay.
We never had very much bossing done. We just traveled along.
Just stayed together.
Well, yeah, we stayed together now for 63 years.
Starting our 54th.
Yeah, we're starting on our 54.
Okay. You want to play us a little more?
Yeah. Swing 'em on the corner, left hand around.
Thank you. Say, could you
I'll play one more.
Okay.
Shall I play it? A song my mother used to sing when I was a kid over in old country, and I played it on the fiddle.
Thank you.
You're totally welcome, I assure you.
There's one more thing I'd like to ask you. Could you tell us a little bit about this little fiddle down here?
What?
This little fiddle down here.
Oh, yes, I can tell you all about that little fiddle. I'll tell you, it's a beautiful piece of work. Here, hold this with me, will you, Ma? The fella in Montrose, Colorado made it. And Montrose, Colorado. Wise folks lived in Montrose, Colorado. And when they were still alive, we went over there to see them ever so often. And this fella that made his little violin, he neighbored with him, and he didn't live very far from him. And I guess that's where he learned that I fiddled. So next time, next time he was there and he knew he was there, he came over and he asked me to go with him to his place. And I did. And you know, I got quite a surprise when I got there. His house wasn't very big, but his woodwork was just like embroidery. And inside of his little room, there was fiddles hanging all around the wall, on the wall there. And I tuned them up and played on them. And he gave me this little fiddle he made. It is made in 1951, I believe. I believe about 1951. And he gave it to me. And I wouldn't take a farm in Texas for that. Now listen to it. Amen.
You needed some rosin on that bow.
Need the rosin and need the fiddle string. The fiddling too. Yes, sir. Are you through with us?
Yes, we certainly are.
Oh, good.
Thank you very much.
You're totally welcome, I assure you.
Joe took us out to his homestead. The homestead lies about 10 miles southwest of Arthur. After the Monharts moved into town in 1935, they rented out the homestead to other ranchers in the area. The buildings on the homestead have been sitting empty since 1960, and age is beginning to take its toll. Once beautiful buildings slowly returning to the earth. Joe told me that it makes him very depressed to see it in this condition. A lot of memories still linger here for his family. Joe Monhart, a man who loves the land and his country very much. Joe became a citizen in 1920, and I can safely say that there are few better citizens anywhere. I am glad to have met and known the Monharts. To have learned their history and shared their company has been a pleasure. Thank you.
You're totally welcome, I assure you. Oh, we press till let's see. Viva las mami la veselishi. Oh, we veselishi. All at see, holka bleda. All at see, holka bleda. Значит, сердечко виспаднеда, ах, о, виспаднеда. Go away, go away.
a fiddle and he'd hold it tight. Angels there would gather around him, and he would play all through the night. He would play all through the night. He would play everything seemed alright, and I cried every time that I watched him play. Oh, he really had something to say. And I watched him steal away. He built himself a cabin at the foot of a hill. He never knew the city street. He never had much money, never needed a will. No. All they had was one old fiddle